All right, on today's Snowboard Project, I have a legend of the sport of snowboarding, now becoming a legend of snowboarding industry. I have Eddie Wall. Now, Eddie got his start on the East Coast, made his way west at a certain point, went to Mammoth. All of this is on the Bombhole podcast. You can go back and revisit that for all of the details. But I'm glad to have you on the show because I have a little bit different line of questioning for you here today, Eddie. How first of all, how are you doing?
Mark, I am doing great, and it's an honor to be here with you. Another like absolute legend is in snowboarding, and yeah, I'm stoked to be on this. Stoked to call you a friend, and yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, people might not know this, but we get to announce the Grand Prix together. Now, it's a job. We have a job to do there. We do the job, but I think we both have a good time doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a blast. It's definitely some of the highlights of my season. Just getting to just chit chat on microphones and yeah, just call out all these crazy tricks and everything.
Just out of curiosity, like how is it different being on one side of the microphone versus the other? I've only been an announcer at these Grand Prix events, but you actually, competed in Grand Prix back in the day, and now you're like kind of officiating, announcing, whatever. But how is it different being a competitor versus just sitting there announcing it?
Well, I mean, there's a huge difference. I mean, generally, if you're announcing it, you're not going to end up in the hospital that night. That's the good.
Okay.
That's the bonus.
Never ended up in a hospital, Eddie, after a
Yeah.
Grand Prix.
But no, yeah, the riding is just pretty crazy. The nerves are super high. The jumps and tricks can get scary. And yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's like everybody's at the same contest, so there's this really fun energy at them, and I feel like everybody's there to like have a good time, but also to push snowboarding. So it's the fun thing is somebody asked me once like, oh, do you miss like being up at the drop in rather than down at the bottom commentating? And the honest answer is like, obviously being a competitive snowboarder and a pro snowboarder is really fun and crazy and a whirlwind, but I love like there's nothing better than getting to go to the events and be a part of the whole scene, but again, not have to kind of risk your life and limb to just be there. So yeah, it's fun. I like it.
I agree with you, and that's why I've been at it for a long time. However, I do have a correction to make. It isn't 26 years, it's 25. I got informed by LinkedIn. So
Ooh.
I'm in my 25th year of announcing Grand Prix, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a great time, and I enjoy, cracking a beer at the end, and I enjoy seeing the progression and the incremental baby steps it's taken over those 25 years. So it's a lot of fun to be an announcer, and I would imagine that unless you're on the podium, maybe less fun as a competitor as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes all different ways. My opinion when I was snowboarding was whether I win or lose, I'm going to get to party afterwards. So I was, and also during my career, I was never like a serious competitive snowboarder. That was like a bonus. My main thing was filming for like forum and DC videos. So the contest were actually was pretty cool for me because I got to go into them with a pretty relaxed point of view. Like if I did well, my sponsors were like, cool. And if I did bad, they were like, yeah, cool, just go film. And so, yeah, I was never too stressed out at contests compared to it's stressful and the nerves are going, but not like my career depended on it.
Right, but in like 2005, 2006, your career as a snowboarder was like on fire. And so you had a pretty good string of like say rail jam victories, podiums, all of that kind of thing. I imagine you had to take it serious enough to do well.
Yeah, I guess everything I did I was taking serious to a certain level. I wasn't just going to go to a contest and like, dork around and do a straight air or like just do a front board or something. Like I was if I was in a contest, I was trying to do well, but I also had the mindset of like again, I'm not like a full-time competitive snowboarder, so if I don't do well, it's okay. And actually that probably helped me do better in a lot of contests because I was just like, you know what? Like I am doing this as like a bonus. And so the amount of the pressure wasn't maybe there as much it was on other people.
It seems like though the sport has evolved a little bit in that you kind of have a hard time today anyway, being a film athlete and then being a competitive snowboarder at the same time. It seems like you got to kind of choose what camp you're going to be in. And you can't just kind of do this and that and the other thing. You have to kind of like focus a little bit more than just like, filming a part. You got to compete and win while filming video parts. I don't know if you can do that today. What say you, Eddie Wall?
Yeah, I think there's a few small examples of people who could maybe do that, like a Red Gerard is one.
Sure.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting in snowboarding as a whole, like up until the late 90s or even mid 90s, competing I think was a pretty serious thing and everybody was competing. And then when videos kind of came into the scene, maybe in the mid 90s, Mac Dog Standard, Hosnick, Absinthe, they came in and kind of changed the scene to where you could make a great career from like 95 to 2010, 2012. Like you could make a solid career, maybe even a better career filming video parts than you could as a competitive snowboarder. Um, but then it shifted, and I feel like a lot of that had to do with the introduction of social media, the decline of these big powerhouse movies that would drop every year. And then now it's almost like I would argue that the majority of the like most, well, I guess highest paid pro snowboarders right now are probably more of the competitive athletes.
Right, but that's changed. I mean, just the high pay level is significantly lower than it was in your day. I mean, I would imagine that you may have had years where you made close to a $500,000 or more, even.
Yeah. It was wild back then, and I don't know. I mean, I think it was just a perfect storm of just the overall economy in the world during from 95 or 98 to 2008, just being like it was a booming economy in the U.S. and all around the world, which I think obviously people are like, oh, making more money. I can go on a ski trip. I can buy a new snowboard every single year. The industry itself and the energy around it, just these, again, there were these a handful of big movies and there were big movie premieres, and it was this kind of larger than life time. And so yeah, there was a lot of money in it at that time. And it is pretty crazy now to see, I mean, I would say the majority of pro snowboarders like have jobs like in the summertime, and or even some of them work a little bit in the winter, and or it's a different landscape. And yeah, I guess it's just like, I don't know.
I don't know. I see a lot of these kids today as being one injury away from banging nails, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough out there for sure. And it's someone asked me the other day, they were like, well, if you would you suggest someone go take the path of being a pro snowboarder, and like if you were talking to like a 15-year-old kid or something. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I know that when I moved out west at 18 years old in 1999 or 1998, like there was no such thing as like or let's just put it this way, I didn't know that you could make money off of snowboarding. I mean, I knew maybe you could make a little bit. So like my passion was there not to make money, obviously. It was just to be a pro snowboarder. um
But what did that mean to you at that time? What did meaning of pro like mean to you?
all I knew moving out west, and this is kind of crazy, which is also probably why my parents thought I was a little crazy, is that like I just said I graduated high school, and they obviously wanted me to go to college, and they were like, what is a pro snowboarder? And I'm like, I'm not sure, but I was like, I know that like there's these videos, and if you get in these videos, I was like, I think you can get paid. And I was like, if you win a contest, you get money. And my parents were like, what are you thinking? Not, I mean, they were supportive, but also like obviously questioning what I was doing. So yeah, I mean, I moved out west like not having no idea, and it just so happened like the timing of like when I turned pro in 2000 and that era, and getting on forum in DC, it was just like crazy. And then before you knew it, I was like buying a big house and all this stuff. But like my that's why it's interesting now as I'm an adult-ish and if a kid was like, oh, I want to be a pro snowboarder, to me, it's like part of me, my kind of grown-up side wants to be like, this is not a good idea, because even if you're one of the top pro snowboarders in the world, you might only be making like 50 grand a year, which is like, I guess if you get a couple sponsors, you're making more than that. But like, I don't know. It's hard. But then at the same time, I'm like, who am I to tell someone to not go do their dreams? Like that was like my whole life has been like follow your dreams, because I was this kid from nowhere and it all worked out. So I'm like, I would never want to tell someone to not follow their dreams. But yeah, it's totally different now.
So describe to me the moment when you became pro, because you're following your dreams. You've got this goal to be a pro rider. You're not exactly sure what that means even. Well, like at what point, I know you'd spent a couple summers at Mount Hood, you got recognized for your ability, but like what was the moment when you became pro?
Yeah, I think my whole theory back then, because there was no Instagram, there was barely internet, like as well, there's internet, but not like you don't go online every day. It was just like, where are the best snowboarders riding? And if I can go there and become as good as them, then I'll probably get sponsored. And what does that mean? I don't know. Maybe I'll get free lift tickets. Maybe I'll get free snowboards. Maybe I'll get free outerwear. Maybe I'll get a little bit of travel budget. I just had no idea. But I just knew if I went to those places and rode well, then I would get recognized. And fortunately, again, just because of the times, like Mammoth was just the hot spot for snowboarding. Like every pro in the world was
It's
like,
like the beginning of Grenade, kind of.
absolutely, yeah. And especially like in the preseason, every pro would go there because it was the first like legit park, and everyone would go kind of like warm up their legs and train for like a month. So you would be lapping the Mammoth Main Park, and any given day, and you're like, oh, there's Travis Wright or Travis Parker, there's Andrew Crawford, there's Kevin Jones, there's Tara Takitis. Like it's just these super pros are just riding right next to you. So it was like, so again, I mean, it came down to me going to Mammoth and going to Hood in the summers, surrounding myself with those good snowboarders. But when it all kind of clicked, the first like small thing that happened, or not small, but the first technically pro thing is within a few months of time, while I was still a janitor at Mammoth, a nighttime janitor. K2 and Smith Optics reached out, Brian Craighill and Corey Smith. They reached out and were like, hey, we can get you a couple $100 a month and free snowboards and some travel budget. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I quit my job. And like, that's when I technically was like, no longer, I was a janitor and I was AKA a professional snowboarder, but I
So
was
you went
probably,
from making 400 a week to 400 a month.
yeah, basically. Yeah, right. Actually, I probably made less as a pro snowboarder than I did as a janitor, but
Okay.
I did actually, considering I had to move out of employee housing, and I didn't even like take that into consideration. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm making like $800 a month. And then I realized, or I was making like $500 a month. And then I realized rent was like 460. And I'm like, damn it.
Right. So you moved
so,
into someone's sofa.
so that was like, I did that for a year. And then I met Kevin Jones riding in Mammoth, and
Hmm.
he was starting Genius, that was like a forum sub brand. And right before that, I had gotten on DC, and like that's when everything really like kick started. And he introduced me to Steve Astafin, so I got an agent, and again that really kick started things.
Were you already getting coverage? Were you like in magazines and in videos already by the time you had an agent, or did the agent come and then all of those other things lined up?
Well, actually, I filmed one video part on a K2 board, and it was a small Mammoth video called Empire, and
Tori Piro?
Tori Piro, yeah,
Yep.
good that good on you. And yeah, so that was in like I think 99 or 2000. And when I filmed that, I had a good season and I got last part in that. And so, but and I actually did have a trans world, like it was kind of like an interview, but it was just a paragraph about me, but then it was like 5 or 6 pages of full photos. So, and I had like a checkout and I had a few things, but like, so there was some momentum behind me, but not a lot. Like, especially, yeah, not a
But in
whole lot.
those days, there were only so many like media outlets. There were the major movies like the Mac Dog and the standard movies, and Absinthe, I guess you could count in that. And then there were a handful of kind of other movies like Tori Piro's movie.
Yep.
And there were two magazines at that time. And so if you did get 5 or 6 pages in one magazine, that was a big deal. Versus today, it's like every week there's another video that had a dedicated crew and riders and everything else, and to me anyway, they all get lost in the mix a little bit today.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And when I, yeah, so I had a little bit of momentum behind me, but when I was riding with Kevin Jones, he was just seeing me riding day to day and, saw something in that. And so it is funny though, because when I do remember hearing later, like when Kevin told Steve Astafin, like, hey, get this kid on, we need to get this kid on Genius and everything, and sign him to the Family, which was the name of his agency at the time. He was like, what are you talking about? Like, who is this kid? Doesn't have like anything. And it's funny because I obviously had a great, like, good relationship with Steve for years, like, and years after that. But at first he was like, rightfully so, he was like, who is this? And fuck, like, thank God for Kevin Jones. He was just like, he
He
was
had your
like,
back.
yeah. And he was like, just trust me, believe in me. Like, this kid's going to do good. And I mean, I'm glad that he did that. And I'm glad I was able to, uh, be worth him going out on a limb for.
Yeah, and so Genius as a brand, that was a brand that was a sub brand of Forum Snowboard started by Peter Line, Kevin Teradikitis, and Jared Eberhard, I want to say was kind of the graphic design behind it. And I was always really impressed with just kind of the sense of humor and the design and all of that. It seems like it went well, and then it didn't go well. What went wrong with Genius? I'm just curious because it seemed like all of the pieces were in place: the best riders, the best designers. You had a lot of things going for Genius. Like, where did it go wrong?
Yeah, so that was all accurate. And the one thing I will point out too is that Evan Rose was a part of that, which is pretty cool. He helped a lot with that. But
He was my roommate in college.
that is amazing. I love that. That is so awesome.
Sorry, Evan.
Yeah. No, so I would say the sorry, I was just trying to get my words together. The short answer is Burton bought Forum.
Okay.
So at that time it was like Foursquare. Wait, I'm gonna,
Special Blend, Foursquare, Forum, Genius, and Circa.
yeah, exactly. And so when Burton decided to call or to buy Forum, they yeah like Genius had so much momentum behind it, and it had great athletes and such a cult following, and everybody was super stoked on it. But when Burton they just looked at Forum being, the bigger company and the main
The
thing.
bigger threat.
Yeah, yeah, right. They want to just buy it to get it off the market. But like, they saw Genius was so small compared to Forum, and they were like, listen, instead of having like Forum and this small thing that could potentially become something, why don't we just take these riders, move them over to Forum, and create this like super Forum team with Kevin Jones and Teradikitis and Andreas Vig, and like, and then you're all on Forum, and we just dissolve Genius because, so it's like one of those scenarios where I think it would have been really cool and awesome to see where Genius went. But at the same time, I mean, it's not like I was bummed to be on a Forum board. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this shit, and then I'm getting to ride with, Jeremy and JP and Devin Walsh and these guys, which was just like a dream come true.
Now, did you like when you were filming with Genius? Were you riding primarily with like Kevin and Tara? Were you kind of like mixing it up with the Forum guys, or just going out with Mac Dog crews? How did that work?
Yeah. So the first video I was in was after the Tori Piro film was, I believe, Pulse, which was a Mac Dog film. So as soon as I got on Genius, Forum and Genius were a sponsor of the Mac Dog film that year because they were not doing a Forum specific movie. And so, um, so Yeah, when I was on Genius, I was primarily filming with Kevin and Tara, Andreas Vig, and Kyle Clancy, and our main our photographer was Ian Reuter, and our filmer was Nathan Yent. So those specifically Kevin and Nathan and Ian really man, they taught me everything about everything. They brought me into the backcountry. They taught me about snowmobiling. They taught me about angles and obviously avalanche dangers and how to build jumps and looking at different aspects. It's looking back, I'm so fortunate to have had them, um, to just really show me the ropes. And yeah, and so we were filming a little bit with the forum guys that year, I think, because I went up to Whistler that year and I was like filming a little bit with like Mike Page and maybe Devin a bit. um, and then that movie, we were all kind of in that. And then I think the next year was Video Gangs, maybe, and Video Gangs was still Genius, and that we were fully filming with the whole like forum team. And that's when we went out to Helsinki and everything like that. And then yeah, and then the following year is when I think it switched over and we were all on forum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, out of curiosity, because I know you came from the East Coast and then went to park riding and such, how long did it take you to like learn how to land in powder, how to ride powder, and to look good doing it, and just to get that kind of skill set beyond like I can land a backside five on a park jump? Like how long did it take you to take that to the backcountry?
I mean, uh, it was difficult. Like any rider who's used to hitting park jumps and goes into the backcountry, it's difficult. But it honestly, it was kind of like being thrown into the deep end, and you have to swim because I filmed that Empire part. Was There was no powder jumps in that because that's when you could like film in Mammoth Main Park.
Yep.
And then Pulse, like we instantly were like out in the backcountry, and that was like I was mainly filming in South Lake Tahoe and a bit in Whistler, and I was just like thrown into it, into kind of like, okay, I'm filming with Mac Dog, like I just have to figure this out. And yeah, I mean, I ragdolled my face off and everything, but like, I guess without sounding like, I feel like I picked it up fairly quickly, and again, I wasn't dropping into lines in AK or anything. I was just hitting cheese wedges into landings, but I feel like I picked it up quickly only because I was just like, I can't waste everyone's time out here. Like I need to just land tricks, And also we weren't doing double corks. We were doing fives and sevens and stuff. But at that time those were big tricks.
Yeah. Okay. So, you're filming all these video parts, et cetera, et cetera. People can go back through your storied career and watch your parts in all sorts of Mac Dog movies and then the Mountain Lab videos. You were in all those. But then kind of at the end of your career, there's a story out there that kind of like both basically Forum thought you were going to ride for DC thought you were going to ride for Forum, and then you were a captain without a boat, essentially.
Yeah, that was a pretty crazy experience, to go through. Good learning experience, but it was, and I think at that time, looking back, I was almost in denial that like they were just going to call me up in 6 months or a year and put me back on, type of a thing. And but yeah, I mean, I essentially had two full sponsors. It would be like riding for Adidas and Nike at the same time, like, because my agent was able to stagger my contracts between just being on boards and outerwear for Forum, but being on boots, for DC. And they had such a big program at that time that was like a huge, like a main sponsor. Again, it'd be like riding for Red Bull and Monster, and they were, and so basically I was getting paid like the salary, like double salary, like a big salary from one company and a big salary from another company. And that all went away very quickly. And that was in 2009, 2010, I think, when basically the economy, in the US there was like,
Housing bubble
yeah,
burst.
housing bubble burst. There's a recession, which I like almost wasn't grasping at that time because I was just so in snowboarding that I was just a kid. I wasn't following the news. I didn't know what was going on, but apparently things were not going well. And that trickles down into snowboarding very quickly. And so all these companies were like, whoa, like, where can we cut back? And the team was one of the big ones. And they're like, okay, these guys are getting paid six figures, and we should, we should really, we should just cut these guys. So again, we had before that, like, been kind of going, baiting each other company, like, hey, DC, you better come with a good contract because Forum is going to like step up head to toe, because that they always, both companies always wanted me to be head to toe. And then Forum, we were doing the same thing with, or DC, we were doing the same thing with Forum, like, hey, step up. And then both were just like, oh, there's no way we're going to be able to match that deal. And I was like, oh no.
Was
And
that your agent driving that, or was that you kind of
well,
with
that
your
was that
agent
was my
figuring it out?
agent. That was my agent, and I don't blame him, because he had that plan. He's like, listen, I'm going to basically have you on two top tier companies for 10 years, and then when you turn 30, I'm going to like kind of have a little bit of a bidding war, and because they the whole time they wanted me to go head to toe. And
Hmm.
so he's like, I'll have a bidding war. You'll go head to toe on one for a 5 year deal. It'll take you to your 35. And during that 5 years, you can kind of like still film and ride, but like kind of get your life together and figure out what you're going to do after snowboarding. And you're going to have this 5 year like padded money situation. And that would, and he couldn't predict the housing bubble burst. Like, nope, nobody, Wall Street didn't predict it. And so it just, the timing, it's funny, the timing for the base of my career was like all time, but the timing for the end of my career was horrible, because it went from like a
All
lot
time in
to
the
zero.
opposite way.
Yeah, like it went to like zero instantly, which is pretty, again, like a hard thing to comprehend. And I was like 29, 30 at the time, where I'm just like, okay. And also I was like, oh, like I've had such a good career up until this point. I hadn't burned any bridges type of thing. So I was like, oh, I'll be able to just call up lots of other sponsors. But their whole thing was, well, A, they also didn't have any money. And B, I was so branded with Forum and DC that they were like, dude, I think I was talking to 32 or somebody, where they were like, dude, we really want to put you on, but like it's going to take, because again, this is before social media. So you couldn't just like put out a press release on social media and the day after you sign, the whole world knows. Like, you have to wait a whole season until the videos come out and the magazines come out, so people are like, oh, Eddie's on 32 now. And then it still would take a long time for people to register that and get used to that. So they were just like, dude, we're going to invest money in you, and it's going to take 2 to 3 years for this to really settle into people, and then you're going to be 33 years old.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna put the money into this 6-year-old named Zeb Powell.
yeah, exactly. No, so yeah, it is what it is. And I got some small sponsors after that, and still kind of like clung on.
Bond and Weekend, something like that.
Yep,
And so
yeah.
you went from making like 20,000 a month to 2,000 a month or something.
Yeah, basic, yeah, yeah. And it was crazy times.
Did
Like,
that take the wind out of your sails? Like when you go from making like substantial income where you're buying cars and houses or whatever, and you go to like being like, oh shit, I can't even pay my rent, or I'm not sure if I'm paying my rent this month. I mean, what did that do to your riding? Did that have an effect on like on your on snow presence?
Um, no, like the money factor didn't at all, and it never did. I mean, for a lot of my career, I never even really knew exactly how much I was making. I just knew ballpark, like this amount or whatever, because I never wanted the money to become a focus or a reason that I was doing it, because that's not why I got into it. Again, I got into it because I love snowboarding, and I wanted to be a known as a very good snowboarder, and like and be on these teams with my heroes. And so the money was never, ever, ever a driving force. Obviously, it was like great when it all worked out, and I was making a bunch of money and buying houses and stuff. But like that was never like a big part of it. The the thing that did like take the wind out of my sails when I was 30 was like injuries, So like I've had 3 left knee surgeries, and around that time I had shattered my collarbone, which is normally not a big deal, but it kept getting infected, and there's metal plates and everything. So I had to get 4 surgeries on it, which is like when you get put under anesthesia 4 times within like a 1 year period, you're just like so exhausted. And then I'm going out just like kind of more thinking, and I'm 30 now, so I'm like older, and I was just kind of my head wasn't there as much. I was just kind of like, dude, I just don't want to be in the hospital anymore. Um, and it didn't like drastic. It's not like overnight. I just hung up my board, but I was far more cautious and particular about what I was hitting, and I didn't have that same like I'm invincible type mentality. So I think that on top of the fact that I wasn't making that much money, just obviously eventually you're just like, all right, well, I don't like can't make a living doing this anymore.
Yeah, and that's got to be like a tough realization. What was it like when you realized that kind of like it was coming to an end? Like, what was that moment where you realized, like, oh, this doesn't last forever?
It is really weird, and I mean, because like the way I would describe it is that as a pro snowboarder, what like you just obviously you kind of dedicate every waking moment of your entire life to snowboarding and the sport, and then when you stop getting paid to do it, to me, the way I felt is that like I was kind of banished and kicked out of the industry, and that like people didn't like me anymore, respect me anymore, and later I kind of realized that that was all in my head. But I mean that's how you feel, because all of a sudden you feel everybody, like I use the analogy of um like one year you're on the red carpet and you're in the big video and everyone's like taking photos with you and you're signing autographs, and 1 year later you don't even have an invite to the premiere, and you're like, oh, there was a snowboard premiere last night and no one told me, and what, like last year I was the star of that movie. So it's a very weird mental thing to go through, even though I tried to prepare myself for it so much, because Kevin Jones, when I met him, he was kind of started going through that kind of stage of his career a bit, and he was always reminding me like very like he would always just be like, nobody in the industry is your friend and they're just in it for the money and stuff. And I mean, in some sense, there that is a bit true. But he was just I think he wanted to make sure I knew like it wasn't going to last forever, and I'm grateful for his advice. um but it's weird, and I think, again, that is why I think a lot of pro snowboarders, like when they kind of lose their last contracts, they just disappear, and they'll go be work construction, they go back to college, they move back to wherever they're from, and they just completely disappear out of the industry, because I think there's this feeling of, okay, well, I gave you my blood, sweat, and tears my whole life, and now you're just going to leave me hanging high and dry. Whether that's, but that's just like, again, they just get out of it and they're like, I don't want to be part of this. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I
And it's
don't.
also probably hard if you're like used to being on the red carpet and everyone asking for your autograph, and then all of a sudden, you get high fives for people you went on trips with or whatever, but it's not the same at all.
Yeah, no, it's humbling for sure, and it's a really interesting thing to go through. And I thought the same thing. Like there was a big part of me that was just like, maybe I'll just get into real estate. Maybe I'll get into construction. Like I had no idea what to do, even though I was thought I was so mentally prepared for it, but I wasn't.
I could see you selling timeshares in Topanga.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down. But I think one of the pivotal moments for me was going to like my wife and I, since I didn't have a job, and at the time she didn't have a job, and so I was like, listen, let's take some money and go get backpacks and just like go travel for a few months, which is obviously a very fortunate thing to be able to do. But it was almost like a go find yourself type moment, or for me, it was just like kind of get away from everything, right?
What did you find? I
We found Thailand. No, and no, so we spent a lot of time in, like, we were in Nepal and Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, a bunch of different zones, just backpacking, staying in hostels, and just kind of yeah, just cruising around. And it was really cool. And we were just kind of partying and just trying to get away from everything. But also in my head, the whole time I kept thinking like, all right, well, we're gonna move back we're gonna go home at some point, and like I need to know what I'm gonna do. So um yeah, we moved back and to Venice Beach, California, and I'm just like
It's a
there
great
was
place not to have a job and having to pay rent.
yeah, right, right. But anyways, there was a snowboard premiere at Stance, and I remember my wife Saudi. She was like, "Oh, we should go down to Stance to the snowboard premiere," and I was like, I I felt like I'm not a pro snowboarder anymore. Like nobody wants me there. This is going to be awkward and weird, and like people are going to be like, "Well, why is Eddie here?" I don't know. I was so in my head, and she and normally those were like the most fun events you could go to. You know, like I was like I loved premieres. Um, but anyways, we she was like, "You need to like get your head back in snowboarding a bit." So we went down there, and right when I walked in, like I just saw so many friends and everyone, and we had been gone for like pretty long time, like months or almost a year, and people came up and hugged us and they're like, "Oh, where have you been?" Like, "Oh," and it was pretty wild. Like it was like a light bulb, like boom, like aha moment of like, this is my family, like this is where I belong, and like I'm gonna do whatever I can now to get like to stay in this industry, you know, and yeah.
And you did a number of different things to stay in the industry.
Anything and everything. I was,
That's right.
yeah, I mean, I was commentating, I was judging the X Games, I was trying to do web series, I was like, and I would just and Saudi also, she made a good point. She's like, just try to go and do anything you can and just talk to people and be like, "Hey, I'll do anything," you know.
I want to ask you about Saudi really quick because you've been married now for quite some time to the same woman, which is more than some of us could say. But, you know, it seems like she has been one of your biggest supporters. You also get along really well. I've hung out with both of you together. And it's like, what role did having the right partner in life play? And was that lucky, or like how did you get into the right relationship, one that could stand the test of time and someone who could support you through your own trials and tribulations?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like how those things work, if it's luck or if it's just like the chance of two people meeting. And um I I mean, I don't know how that works, but I will just say, yeah, I'm grateful that that worked out, and like we met and everything clicked. And yeah, I mean, she's been super like helpful and like encouraging through a lot of these times, and also like motivating in even in a hard way. Like I remember once she was just like, I forget what it was, but she's basically, I was just in Venice kind of like moping around, and she's like, "You can't do this. Like go figure this out right now." Like, you know, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Okay, I'll snap into it." And you know, and just like she's like, "Get on the phone, call some people. Like you can't just like hope." I think that's what it was. I think here's the oh, this is a big one. When you're done your snowboarding career, you assume that companies and the industry is going to call you and ask you if you want to a job. Like, "Hey, do you want to come be a team manager? Hey, do you want to come like help design product? Hey, do you want to come work in sales?" That's the thing that does not happen, or at least didn't to me, for a long time. And so that would be my advice for anyone listening to this who, whether actually you were a pro or not, like no one's going to come knocking on your door. You have to go, you have to knock on doors, then you have to pound on the door, then you have to kick the door down and like walk in and be like, "I'm not going anywhere." And that's what she helped me realize. She's like, get on the phone, call people, go to events, put yourself out there, and like make the effort, you know?
Yeah, and
Um,
that's how you became the coach of the Chinese half pipe team.
yes. Long story short. Yeah.
So, should we expect an Edward Wall the fifth anytime soon?
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I'm just trying to keep my own life together right now. I don't know about taking care of another human.
Okay. Well, it seems like you're doing pretty good. You're now working with Arbor, and your role there has changed slightly, but you started there as the product manager, I want to say, in 2020. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so what was it like to make this transition from like, you know, calling the office, you know, to talk to the people who work there and being in the field, snowboarding, doing whatever, to being the guy that people would call in the office?
Yeah, it's a trip. And again, I mean, for me, I really I love it because I'm still staring. I'm staring at a computer all day, but or most days, but like it's still snowboarding, right? I'm still looking at snowboarding. I'm still talking about snowboards, especially as the product manager for just about 4 years. I mean, I was overseeing the whole product line at Arbor, all the boards, all the bindings, working with the factories, learning like so much that I never knew. But again, for the people being out in the field, I think it's a great thing to, like, okay, here's an example. If someone's been working in the industry but they were never a pro snowboarder, like I feel like sometimes they might think, oh, I missed out, I didn't get to go, you know, snowboarding all day and hit backcountry jumps and all of that stuff. But and as great and awesome as that stuff is, it is also very hard, and there's a reason that it's hard to be a pro snowboarder. It is a lot of work, and there's a lot of risk. And like, I mean, there's something to be said for every day, like waking up and being like, okay, I've got to go do some really scary shit today, whether it's like hitting a giant ledge over like a 40-foot drop in a parking garage in Finland, or sending it off some 100-foot or whatever 80-foot backcountry jump in Whistler, and you're 100 miles from any hospital, you know. And so now it's funny because again, I'm happy to wake up and do 60 emails and stuff, because I'm like, if someone said tomorrow I have to wake up at 4 a.m. and snowmobile for 3 hours through the whoops and build a backcountry jump, like I'm like, that would be fun, but I know what that takes, and I'm good, you know. Like I like where I'm at.
So
Like,
the
did that?
grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence.
No, no, not at all. It's not. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
I have another question that kind of relates to this a little bit tangentially, but as a professional snowboarder, you had pro models. And so, I'm kind of curious about the difference from being a product manager and designing snowboards and being a pro athlete and designing a snowboarder. What was it like designing like a board for Genius or for Forum? What was that process like when you were doing it back then?
Yeah, it was awesome. And I think one of the reasons it's interesting, because I worked with Dave Appel over the years, who was a product manager forever in our industry, and or had lots of different roles. But I mean, he was actually one of the references for my job at Arbor, which is really cool because, he said, when Eddie was a pro, like there were some pros who just said like, oh, kind of do this, do that, and they didn't seem like crazy interested, or maybe they were too busy. But during my career, I was always really stoked when I was able to get whether like pro model outerwear with Foursquare, or a glove with Grenade, or a snowboard for Forum. And so I love to be involved in the process, and talk to the designers and ask how things work. And, yeah, so I was totally involved, I think. And now being on this side of it, and when I'm working with, someone like Brian Iguchi or Pat Moore, designing boards like the Satori that's out now, or the Candle Rain, like, um yeah, it's cool. It's interesting to be on this side of it and to be like getting their feedback. And what's different, or what I didn't really understand, is like they're giving you all this feedback, but you also have to be like, okay, where was this going to fit in our overall line? Where does this make sense? And like, do we need to kind of be like, hey, like, I know you want this exact thing, but can we tweak it a little bit so it fits over here, because that's like a hole that's missing in our overall line. As well as like, they might like, oh, I want this and this, and I'm like, yeah, but at the factory that's going to be like 8 more materials, and like drive the cost of your board up to like $700 retail. So you probably want to bring that down a little bit. And so it's cool. It's like it's a totally different way to kind of look at it. And yeah, it's just another, side of it.
Right. So when you were like back then, did you kind of have a blank sheet of paper to design your board for Forum, or was it kind of like, hey, you're gonna take this board and come up with a graphic? Was it more like graphic oriented, or were you really in the side cut and the flex and the profile, the tip and tail and all of that?
Like, I didn't get like down to, the millimeter of the nose and tail widths and lengths, and like like how much transition is going to be on the side cut and things like that. I didn't go like that crazy, but I definitely was involved in like flex, side cut, and just like, I didn't know what I know now. But I knew how to like, I knew what I wanted to ride, and I would get on a prototype and be like, oh, this isn't that great. Or, but to be totally honest, I mean, back then the snowboards were all so similar. Like every single snowboard was a popsicle stick shape. Every single one, like I was a jib board, so it's like I want it soft to do nose presses, and so like I wasn't trying to be too demanding. It's not like we were trying to design some crazy ATV snowboard that had some weird shapes and all sorts of crazy side cut. It's like it was the stuff I wanted was very straightforward, I would say. So it wasn't too complicated.
Okay, so you used to ride a softboard for nose presses on rails and stuff. Has that changed? And has your stance changed? Because a lot of people have like one stance they had like when they were teenagers that they still have today. I'm just curious, have you evolved at all in terms of like what you ride and how you ride?
Um, as far as stance goes, I think pretty early on, like as I started riding Mammoth and stuff, my stance went got to be like 22 and a half. And it's funny because I wasn't at some point it went to 23 and a half, but I have a pro model a board, and it has like the little like suggested stance, and it's 22.5. So I was like, okay, cool. I know that my stance my whole career was 22 and a half, but somewhere along the line, like probably in like '06 or '05, stances started getting kind of wider. So I think for a little bit I went to 23 and a half, and now I'm back down to like 22 and a half. I was never like a 19 or 20 type of guy. Like I don't like small stances. I know that that kind of got popular in jibbing for a little while. But I've never been like, I just don't feel like I have the stability. And then as far as flex and everything, I still like softer boards. I've never been a stiff board type of guy. Like I always say, a stiff board is like the snowboard's riding me. I'm not riding the snowboard. And that's just personal preference. I don't know. Obviously, some people like Jake Blauvelt loves stiff boards. Pat Moore, he likes fairly stiff boards. And so it's to each his own. But I will say one part of it for me was my knee, because in 2003 is when I shattered my kneecap, and that like since then I've had very bad knee pain like all the time through my whole career till still now all of this. So stiff boards, like it takes more effort to like move them around and tweak them, and so it puts more strain on your knee, at least for me. So softer boards, like if I'm going to move, it kind of gels with you, you know. And so it was like took a lot of pain out of my knee to ride softer boards.
Were you riding a forward stance on the front foot and a rearward standing duck footed?
Yeah, I still my whole life for forever has been positive 18, negative 12. I've
Really?
never changed that once in my entire life.
Not even on a directional board, not even on a Satori. You don't put it forward, huh?
No, and also to Satori, actually, the inserts are centered on the contact point, so it's like a directional twin.
I see. Well, you would be disappointing Chad Otterstrom right now because he thinks that's a whack style. Just saying.
What, he for real?
Yeah, for real. He's like thinks that's the vlogger stance.
What but he was riding duck stance back in the day, wasn't
Well, yeah, there was a time, but that's when he was spending like 80% of his time in the park doing,
he?
riding switch and forward. And I guess the point is if you're riding forward 80% of the time, then you should have a forward pointing stance, something like that.
I think that makes total sense. Also, Chad, I feel like still does ride the park all the time, so
He
it.
does.
But also, I don't I wouldn't say I ride straight like my forward stance not 80% of the time at all. And again, because of my knee, like I ride switch, like even in on powder days, like I will ride switch. And again, this isn't like me trying to brag or something. It's because I have to take the pressure. My back leg is my bad knee. So like if I'm cruising on powder, like for the kind of scarier, like or like steeper lines and stuff, I'm obviously going to be riding my forward stance. But as soon as it's mellower, I pop around and put the weight on my back, my good knee, on my front knee. So and when I'm riding groomers, like I'm always like switching regular because
Okay.
yeah. So, and that's not to like defend my stance. That's just my knee hurts, and I have to ride switch a lot to give my left knee a break.
Okay, well that does make sense, I guess.
So
If you
take
want.
take that, Chad Otterstrom. No, I'm just kidding. No, no, Chad's the goat. I love him.
Yeah, he is the go. He just left for Japan, so he'll be there for the next month.
Oh, so
Still riding
he's
every day, still like a pro, if you will.
yeah,
He's still chasing the dream.
dude. He's going over to meet the every other snowboarder in the industry right now. It's
Pretty
like,
much,
yeah,
pretty
the
much.
whole snowboard industry is in Japan, and it's funny. I think almost the entire Arbor team's headed over there, and I can't go because I'm going to the X Games. But man, yeah, I Japan's the best.
Yeah, it's they got some snow there right now, and it seems like that is the place to be globally
Yep.
at the moment. So here's another subject I wanted to touch on with you, and maybe this is kind of more informational, but I think that your experience will inform this, which is, what were your like favorite places to visit globally to go snowboarding? Like, what was the most fun that you had snowboarding, and was it because of the fact you landed a trick there and finished your video part or whatever? Or was it because you just had a good time with your friends or whatever?
Awesome question. I think the well, let's start with, and you're gonna love this one, and we might not even, this might last a half an hour, but you know where I'm going with this. I mean, to me, the most impressive place that like completely blew my mind for snowboarding, which I didn't even get to go to until after my career, was Alaska. And you're very familiar with Alaska, Tailgate, Alaska. You have a kick-ass house up in Alaska.
In the immortal words of Nate Bozung, duh.
I love when we were commentating and you go, Eddie, where's the most beautiful place in the world? And I was like, New Zealand. And you're like, no, that's the second most beautiful. And I was like, oh yeah, Alaska.
Yeah, I'm sold on Alaska for sure.
No,
But
I mean, Alaska, that was just like the most mind melting trip I've ever done. We got to go heli up there, and the size of the mountains, the length of the runs, like it's just, you can't even wrap your head around it until you're there. It's like almost impossible
had you
to.
already been like heli skiing before you went to Alaska? Because it is fundamentally different in like BC heli skiing and Alaska heli skiing.
Oh,
Maybe you could characterize that a little bit so the people who don't know will know.
yeah. I mean, I've helied in Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, and British Columbia, and maybe, I don't know, maybe some other spots. But
Sounds luxurious.
but yeah, very fortunate, and I don't take those experiences for granted. Um, and I mean, the difference with Alaska, like for instance, a lot of people go heli up in British Columbia, which is like, I mean, no matter what you do, if you're on a heli, you're having a great day.
It's going to be
But
powder.
yeah, and but I mean, and the runs are long and they're epic, but like, it's just nothing compares to Alaska. It's like, man, it's just, again, it's hard to even put into words, but the size of the mountains, the sheer vertical you're getting, the expanse of them, you get on top of the biggest peak you've ever been on, and you look out, and there's just 1,000 miles of those peaks, and you're just like, oh my god, like it's no wonder. I always say now, I'm like, it would have been interesting to see like the trajectory of my career had I been to Alaska at like 20, because I'm not saying at all that I would have been like a Jeremy Jones or something like that, but I think I would have prioritized a trip there every year, like in the spring, even if it was just to like hit jumps or something. Just when I had the budget to do that, that would have been a major priority in my life. And I'm happy that I got to go, but yeah, it was maybe a little late.
Well, it's never too late to go back, Eddie.
Yes, you are so right, and I'm gonna maybe this spring, maybe we'll see.
I think you should do that. I'll be up there March, April, and May. The
Okay,
earlier you go, the better the powder.
okay,
Just
good to
saying.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll touch base on that. But besides that, I mean, like if you're just gonna go, like the way I would sum it up quickly, if you just want really deep powder and like fun low angle pow, obviously Japan, and the whole experience of Japan is just incredible. If you want the most beautiful, well, second most beautiful place in the world, I mean, New Zealand is just mind blowing.
It
The
is.
actual resorts there are actually really small. I feel like, or at least the ones I've been to, but just it's just so beautiful out there. And then if you're just like trying to go and ski at a resort, um, the Alps are obviously like mental. You know, you go into Switzerland and France and northern Italy, like the resorts are like Mammoth is a huge mountain, and Mammoth is like so tiny compared to like a resort in the Alps. You know, they're like they're just so expansive, and they have après ski, and they have great beer and pretzels, and that's yeah, can't beat it. And but career wise, I mean, for me, like looking back at my career, I kind of had the most time spent was like hitting rails in Finland is like we had such good times in Finland, you know, that it's again, I wouldn't really suggest anyone like save up their money and go on a snowboard trip to Finland unless you like really love hitting handrails. But like the 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 culture there, the people, the just Helsinki's a really fun city, and like we just had so and like and then shooting over to Oslo, like we had a lot of like really fun moments out there riding
Okay.
that stuff.
Let me give you a couple of resorts and you tell me which one you like better because they're going to be a little bit different from each other. Let's go with like Whistler and Mount Baker.
Ooh, mm, oh well, to be totally honest, I've only ridden Baker twice, and I've only ridden the actual resort of Whistler twice. I've spent
Fair
tons.
comparison in my book.
There you go.
Most people ride 5 days a year, so your 2 days of both of those will count.
um. Uh. Sorry. Can you edit out coughs on this?
Sure.
Um. I would say, yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Whistler backcountry, but not at the resort. It's two totally different experiences because
That's why I'm
Baker's
asking you to compare them.
like so for the people out there, like if you're gonna go to Baker, you're gonna get this cool backcountry experience. The lodge in the town are super tiny, and like it feels like you're back in like the 80s or something. And I think there's something to be said for that that is so cool. And you'll probably stay in like a little cabin in Glacier, and there won't be internet, and there won't be cell phone service, and so it's like completely different. And then Whistler is just like this massive resort, and you have this huge village at the bottom, and there's really fun bars and great food, and like the vibe up in Whistler is really cool. Man, that's tough. I mean, for me, if someone said tomorrow you could go to Whistler or Baker, I would personally, I'd probably go to Whistler just for the sheer fact that it's like in another country, and I just love trying. Like, it's fun to go to other countries, and just even if the culture is slightly different. And I spent so much time in Whistler; it's kind of like nostalgic to go back there and like, oh, I remember that when I was like in my 20s, and you know, I have a lot. I have like way more history in Whistler because I spent a lot of time up there. So yeah.
Okay. I'll give you another resort lineup that'll be two closely similar resorts anyway. How about like Aspen and Vale?
Uh, um, I mean, in my mind, they're identical to be like again, I've been to Aspen for basically once a year for 23 years for the X Games, and because I've either been a competitor or a commentator or a judge, or now I work on the kind of sports and comp side. Um, but that's do you mean Aspen? I don't even understand because is Aspen buttermilk
There's,
or
I guess, I don't know. Yeah, which Ajax or
Ajax
Buttermilk,
or
whichever
whatever?
one.
I
Oh,
mean, I guess, and you said Vale was the other one.
yeah, Vale.
Yeah, I've again, I've only been to Vale a couple times. To me, the resorts are super similar. They're just kind of like trails, and I guess I would just say Aspen because you get to go into that town and experience like because everybody's going to be like, ooh, Aspen, and you get to see people wearing like the fur boots and everything. It's just kind of the whole funny experience
Yeah.
of it. So yeah,
Okay, how about Squaw and Mammoth? Or I mean Palisades and Mammoth. Sorry, don't
yeah,
cancel me.
uh, yeah. Uh, I mean, for me, Mammoth, of course, I've spent 20, this will be my 24th season there. I know that mountain like the back of my hand. I actually have only ridden Palisades twice. Once it was when it was closed for like a park shoot. Actually, that might be where that's where I shattered my collarbone, I think. But the other time I got to ride Palisades is a fun story. Kevin Jones had a house up there, and he's like, drive up, we're getting a huge storm. And I think I was in South Lake, or I don't know where I was, but I drove up there, and I got up there late, and I was knocking on his door, and he wasn't answering, and it was like dumping snow, and he never answered. So I was just like, okay. And so I just slept in my truck in his driveway, and he woke up in the morning, and and he's just like knocking on my window, and my truck is just had all iced up on the inside, and we had gotten like 2 or 3 feet that night. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, you didn't, like, I think you fell asleep or something. And he was like, oh man. He's like, well, lace up your boots, let's go. And we got in, like, I think it was like first or second chair on KT or whatever. That is it, K1, KT2, whatever, I don't know.
KT 22.
Yeah, something like that. And we got like first or second chair on that, and like we were bombing under the lift and like dropping some little cliffs and stuff, and everybody's hooping and hollering, and like it was such an incredible experience. But yeah, but I would say Mammoth.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what's your favorite resort on the East Coast? You can pick any one east of the Mississippi,
Hmm.
including Wisconsin and Minnesota. I'll include those because you might be a Tyrol guy or something.
I'm gonna say two, but I think I'm just gonna have to say Montage Mountain in the Poconos. I think it was called Snow Mountain for a while, but that's where I grew up riding. It has like 3 or 4 chairlifts. It's super tiny. I thought it was huge when I was a kid, and then going back there now, I'm like, whoa, this is pretty small. But it's just the nostalgia of being back there is so cool, because that's where I kind of grew up competing and everything from like 1993 to 99. And so I'll definitely say Montage, but also I think Killington, because that was our, what we would call our spring migration. We would go just for one contest. We'd always go up for spring loaded, and we did spring loaded, I think, every year from 93 to 99. I was always like terrified, because that's where like all the good riders were, and I was just not at that level, and I was so scared and nervous. But like I can like smell, and then we would actually go up. I don't, maybe one other trip for the last one. Superstar would leave the snow on that one strip, and it was
Yeah.
just a mogul field for like 1,000 vertical.
Until the end of May, there'd be like a mogul field on
Yeah,
the mountain.
and like it was so funny because all the snow had melted, so it's just, and they put hay everywhere, and it has this like muddy hay farm smell to it, and like I can't, I that still, if I smell that, it's like I just think of Superstar in May. And like my dad and I would go up there and stay at like some sort of like ghetto hotel, or like a lodge where there's like 10 bunk beds in a room type of situation, and go hike, build a little jump at the bottom, and like hit moguls. And that was just so fun.
Okay, that's good. Now, how about for Europe? What's your favorite resort in all of Europe? You can include France, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, if you want to include them. Anywhere you like.
Um, well, I guess I like whenever I went over there, oh man, actually I got one. It's Avoriaz, France.
Okay.
Avoriaz, well, okay, Avoriaz is amazing, and Teens, like Tignes, France.
Hmm.
Both of those are cool. Tignes is cool because there's like these crazy those après ski parties like halfway
Hmm.
down the hill. There's a little lodge, and everyone's like blasting techno and like spraying champagne everywhere, which is just so wild. And it's a huge mountain, of course. But uh, what was uh, what was the first resort? Avoria.
Avarez.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Avoriaz, that's like where Nico Droz, that was like his home
Yep.
mountain, or maybe still is. But that place is like the trippiest place, because you park in this parking lot, and like you put your luggage and stuff on a tram, and then you go up this like 1,000 foot vertical cliff. Like it's like a mini half dome type thing, and then the whole entire mountain or town is like on a cliff, and the roads are just snow. So there's no like trucks or motorized vehicles, and like you get up there, and if you want to go to your hotel, there's like a horse and a wagon, and a sleigh, and they like pull you around, and then you kind of snowboard. And it's been in a bunch of films and stuff, and I think actually recently online, like Tom Cruise jumped a motorcycle and like skydived off of it, that cliff. But like that, it's like the craziest magical wonderland. It just seems so fake, because it's this little cool town on top of a cliff, and it's cool. It's like quiet because there's no cars, and you're just up there the whole time. And then of course the lifts all go right out of the town, so you just walk out your door to the lift, and then you just have, again, one of these crazy resorts that's like bigger than you can imagine.
Okay, I got two more for you, and then
Cool.
we'll move on. Helsinki or Salt Lake City for rail riding?
Oh, I mean, no contest at all, Helsinki. Well, for multiple reasons. First, Salt Lake, even by the time I started snowboarding, was like starting to get pretty destroyed. So when you went to a rail, you're like, what trick can I try? And they're like, well, there's been 50 tricks done on this by all of the guys who live out there. Um, but Helsinki, when we went, was in 2000, early 2000s. And I think only one other crew had gone earlier, which was Robot Food, to link up with Yoni Malmi. Um, and I know that it was funny because like Malmi apparently was always telling the forum guys to come over there, and they were all like, dude, we live in Salt Lake, like we got the best stuff here. But then when we went, and we actually, like, me, I forget who was on that very first trip, but it was like me, Yoni and Lowry Heskari already lived over there, but I went, and like maybe Travis Kennedy. I don't know if it was him, if he was on the team yet. But anyways, it was like like we were just hitting up like 10 rails a day and get stacking so many clips. And Rob Mathis was with us, and he's like, oh my god, like if Jeremy and JP were here, they would lose their minds. And like, I don't want to say that we like opened up Helsinki, but we were definitely one of the first like big crews to go there and like hammer out tons of spots. And then all of those were in Video Gangs, and then Video Gangs was like a pretty big movie. So I think that kind of like opened up the doors to Helsinki. And in my mind, Helsinki is kind of like the Barcelona of skateboarding for snowboarding, like, because you don't get kicked out. That's the best part. And maybe now you do, because they've like, it's been getting ransacked for 20 years, but like, it's like, it was so epic because there's no like lawyers over there, so, or they don't sue people like we do here. So they're just like, yeah, if you want to fall and break your leg, that's your own dumb fault. And but man, it's just like, it's just so epic over there to like, because when you're hitting a rail, especially if you're trying a scary trick, like the whole getting kicked out factor is a big part of it, because you're just like trying to be quiet and you're trying to sneak around and you're trying to like, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, drop in. And like, it's all weird. And like, there's this energy of like, if we get kicked out, we're going to like waste our whole day and lose the shot and not get a clip. When that's just like out, and you can just like relax and build a rail or build a spot as long as you want, and like there's no issues, like it takes a lot of the it just like adds so much bonus to the whole thing. So Helsinki.
Okay, that's a good answer. Well thought out. Last one, Japan. Where would you go in Japan? Are you going to Hokkaido? Are you going to Niseko? Where are you going?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was just part of like scheduling. I've been like helping schedule this whole Arbor trip out there, because some of our team riders are going to go out there to film in like a couple days. But I, to be totally honest, when I went to Japan, I was with the forum crew, and we didn't film out there a ton. We were generally there either for contests or for video premieres and stuff. So um, the majority of my time spent in like has been in Tokyo. We went to Nagano once, which is on the main island. It was super fun. But when we went to Hokkaido, like to the northern island, and rode all that infamous like the like armpit deep pow where you're just cruising and there's trees everywhere. I don't even know where we were because I was just a kid. Like, I'm like, tell me where to go. Here's our hotel room. Like, I wasn't paying attention back then. So I don't even know where I went, where it was awesome. But I will say, I'll tell you a story. I was with, at the top of this run, I think I was with Peter Line and Mike Page and maybe somebody else, but it was just this epic power run. And the trees, it was like this white bark and all the trees had yellow leaves, and we drop into this run, there's not a single track in view, and we're just gliding, floating through the powder, and then the wind started blowing and all the leaves fell off the trees and were like blowing in the air, and it was like these yellow, bright yellow leaves against the white snow, and we're just like hooping and hollering and yelling at each other and whistling, and like that was one of the most magical moments I've had on a snowboard. So yeah, I would highly suggest checking out Japan.
Okay. Now, I guess this will be the final question. I know we could go on and on. I barely touched on your career here so far, but I didn't want to do the same interview the Bomb Hole did,
Yep.
etc. So I wanted to ask you some different stuff. But I mean, here's a question. You've accomplished so much in snowboarding. You've coached a Chinese halfpipe team. You've announced and judged the X Games. You've had pro models. You've won the U.S. Open Rail Jam. Could go on with your different accomplishments. What boxes do you have left to check in the sport? What things are you looking forward to accomplishing as a snowboarder, as someone who defines himself as a snowboarder today? It could be in the industry, it could be as a rider, it could be anything.
Um, Wait, well, how I would define myself, or like,
No, no, like what boxes do you have left to check in snowboarding? Like what are you looking forward to doing that you haven't done yet?
I mean, I think that's the final box is where I'm at right now. It's essentially I was a product manager for 4 years, and now I'm getting into the marketing side. So now I kind of would like to master this whole side of things. Like I'm really excited to get into the whole marketing and athlete management side of things, and just learn again, learn. And so I honestly like that. Well, I want to say the final box, but like
You're not going to see it that way when you start managing the team budget and then you're told you got to drop half your team. It won't be so fun anymore.
yeah, no, I hope that doesn't happen, and that will be a horrible thing to have to do if or when that comes. But no, I mean, now again, my purpose or my plan is just to learn as much about marketing as possible. And then after that, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think every snowboarder dreams of like one day starting their own brand. I've thought of that a few times. Peter Line and I've talked about some things here and there, but like now that I'm on this side of the industry and learning product management and again budgeting and marketing, it's I do see how it is incredibly difficult to start a company that will become successful, especially I guess I would say hard goods, but soft goods as well. um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh, it'd be so cool to start my own brand. But again, at the same time, I think I still have something to learn. And to be honest, like I'm really stoked for this opportunity that I have with Arbor and everything that's like so far down the line. But for now, it's just to learn this whole side of the thing. I even want to learn more about sales and just yeah, I
Well,
love
I
it.
think they're all interrelated because really it starts with the sales, the marketing hopefully drives the sales. But every aspect of it, the team is part of the marketing, the promotions or advertising, that's part of the marketing, the displays you put in shops, your hang tags, that's all marketing, right? And so you
Yep.
have a lot of new hats to wear. And so I think that'll be pretty exciting for you. It's kind of a challenging time, I would say, just in that there's so many different avenues to market and so few that like back in your day it was like very concentrated. Now it's very kind of spread out, and so learning to navigate that I think will be a challenge. But I think it is kind of an exciting time to be involved with the marketing of snowboarding and to put a piece of yourself back into kind of the future of a brand and where it sees itself. So that seems like it'll be a pretty exciting time for you. We could talk marketing for the next hour because that was really my training and background, and every decision I made in snowboarding was based in marketing. So
Yeah.
we could do that in another podcast because we've already been going for over an hour here. So I think we should probably wind it down. But before we go, is there anyone that that you're looking forward to go riding with here this season? Anyone that you're looking forward to kind of seeing out in the mountains in the snow?
Well, hopefully, well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks up in Mammoth, and maybe, really, hopefully, seeing you in Alaska. We'll
Yep,
see if that
you're
works. Now that
invited.
I'm taking over some of the team stuff, my schedule is like slowly stacking up left and right, which is kind of overwhelming. But um, yeah, I don't know. Honestly, like I just the thing I love about snowboarding is just going up to the hill no matter where I am, whether it's a contest or an event or a trade show or just in Mammoth. I like kind of just cruising up and like seeing who's there and bumping into people on the chairlift and like ripping some laps and you know.
Okay, so let me ask you a hard question. Would you rather go take a lap if you could only choose one of these riders to take a lap with? Would you rather go out with Peter Line or Kevin Jones?
Oh man. that's there's no way I could ever decide that. But I will. It's funny. As soon as I said I just like go up to the hill, like those are the two people that like I would look forward to taking runs with. And
Okay,
yeah, so and there's no way I could choose one or the other because they're both amazing.
cool. Well, thank you so much for your time here, Eddie. I appreciate you coming on the Snowboard Project. It's always good to have some different voices on here, and you definitely have a unique perspective compared to a lot of the people I've talked to. So I appreciate your time, and I do look forward to Mammoth and Alaska after.
All right, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Now hold on 1 second here, Eddie. I got to stop recording and then let your thing.